All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope nobody hurt themselves shoveling. Um, I'd like to call the meeting to order, acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Neil Harden. I'm chairing today's panel. With me are Gail Anderson and Brent McIntyre. The assessor today is, well, it says Mackenzie Omachinsky, but it doesn't look like Mackenzie Omachinsky. And the administrative personnel is Tristan Braden. Uh, we will be hearing applications for revision the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application and will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by council and is independent of it in the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order to be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following a swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by the questions the applicant may have, then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application is being brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You'll receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed and recorded and will be part of the public record. We'll be hearing items 1 through 7 on the docket today. Mr. Bredin, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Absolutely. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
My name is Jared Story.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Our first property today is 390 Hargrave. So, Mr. Assessor, you can begin.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. File 24-1505, roll number 13052830000 390 Hargrave Street. Model valuation is $3,366,000. There's two classifications. There's commercial in the $1,063,000 range, and there's residential in the $2,003,000 range. So the building, it's a multi-use apartment building. It's originally built in 1912. It's got an effective year build of 1955 on it. It used to be I think it was like a warehouse, and it was converted in 1987 to a multi-family building and with the commercial on the bottom. So that's the cause of the effective year built on it. 23 suites, no parking. That's notable. So I was reviewing this file yesterday, so I am going to make a recommendation on it in regards to the commercial on it after looking at the applicant's brief and also finding a lease we have in the system. I'm going to change the commercial valuation to $770,000. And so what that's based on is you follow me down to page 4, please. So on page 4, there's a retail premise 11990. I'm removing that from the valuation, looking at the lease and the area that the tenant is leasing that these top 2 spaces are assigned to. I only have the square footage on file for the first one. And then I saw like an overhead like plan of the place. So I'm basically pulling that 1990 out. I think this is something that the applicant and I now agree on. It should be inspected. I suspect the other space might be the basement, but if it is, it shouldn't be. I wouldn't think that the rate would be, if you're going to have them separated, the rate would be the same. So I'm just pulling it out. So, but I'm keeping the same parameters in terms of like cap rate and whatnot. So it's still a 7.2 cap. The NOI for the retail now, if you follow me to, sorry, page 3. The NOI for the retail is 38,441. And with a 7.2 cap, that's 533 904. So that rounds to the 534, and then nothing changes with the restaurant. So I'll just pause there before I keep going again.
Okay. So
So the overall commercial valuation for CC20 is now 770.
okay, just a minute.
CC 60, right? For class code 60.
Class code 60, yes. Class
Yep.
code 60.
So that's 534. Okay, I got that. That's a CC 60. Okay.
And then the restaurant stays the same, so it's 770 in total.
Yeah. So your revised valuation is
Oh, then to add that to the
3,073,000, is it?
let me just do a quick sum here. What was that? That would be 3 million. Let me put this in 3,073,000.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Story, how do you feel about that?
I'd certainly like to proceed, but that narrows our issues, Mr. Chair. So thank you, Mr. Brokus, but we're still a little ways away. We're closer, but I would like to proceed, but I'll be expedient with my presentation, my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So then proceed, Mr. Brokus.
Okay, so then just going back to page 3, continuing on. It's 23, so 9 1-bedroom, 12 2-bedroom, and 2 4-bedroom, 23 units total for the apartment side of the coin there. $989.17 is the rent assigned by the model. Modeled expense ratio cap rate 5.3 comes out to 100,000 market value per suite. Again, I've amended the commercial based on the lease and my review yesterday at home. So on page 4, it shows again the rent that's been assigned to each premise. So it's for the retail, it's $11.59 and $13.79 based on the size, and then the restaurant we've got $13.96. Rent comparables on page 5 for the apartment side of the coin there. It shows that we're falling within the range of the comparables in the nearby area. Pardon me. some retail comparables on page 6 and a couple of restaurant comparables on page 7. Cap rate evidence on page 9. Again, you've seen this table several times before, so I'm not going to belabor the point. They're not site specific. They're just some examples of sales that took place to substantiate our range, which is found on page 10. So after the Municipal Act excerpts, we've got the on page 12, we've got the income and expenses. So they've got, looks like it's combined income and expenses from the commercial and retail, or that's right, the commercial and apartment. So without any way to like separate them and kind of like tease them out and try and work out an NOI for each stream. Not able to really put too much into them, so just went with the model on it. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Story?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Brokus, is this, sorry, I think you said this is all model derived, save for the adjustment that you've now made this morning, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and when the model creates an assessment for this property, do they draw on the effective age or the structural age as a starting point to determine the cap rate and expense ratio and that sort of thing?
It's the effective age, I believe.
Okay. Okay, just very quickly. So have you visited this property at all?
I think I've walked by it, but I haven't been inside.
Okay, have you been in the restaurant? I guess you probably haven't if
No,
that's
I haven't.
okay. There's a reason that I ask, and I'll get to that in my presentation. But can you tell me why the model is applying a cap rate that is 110 basis points higher on the retail stream than it is on the restaurant stream?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay, and then the rents, I think we're fine. Just very quickly though, just for clarification, page 5 on the rent comps, our rents are actually higher than yours, but just as a point of clarification for the board, this table appears to be indicating that the suites are 1,893 square feet, but can we agree that is actually just the total leasable area of the building, and then you divide it by the 23 suites or so? Is that?
Yeah, I honestly, this, almost wish they wouldn't put this row in because it's kind of a source of confusion. So yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Page 9, gone over these a number of times. There's no calculations to support these that the board or the owners or their agents can view. Is that fair?
Yeah, not in my submission. No, there isn't.
Okay. And can we agree that well, 677 Maryland is probably well, closest, I guess, to in nature to our subject. There's a more recent sale than that 2020 sale, correct?
Yeah, there is. I saw that. It's just the kind of data available in consecutive years wasn't there. So I kept the old sale from last go around.
Okay. And now these are cap rates that you've calculated to support the model, but were these sales used in the model?
I mean, I'm not part of the modeling process, but I would think so. These are the good ones.
Okay. Okay. I think I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Those are my questions.
Okay, questions, Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McIntyre.
So just one question, Mr. Brokus. On your first page, you indicate a leasable area, which I assume is the sum total of the commercial.
Let me see. Yes, that is correct.
So even removing the tenant on the income side, that doesn't change this figure?
Well, I mean, what I think that is I think that's the basement. Like the lease that I saw in our system, and it might have been actually submitted from the applicant. I know this area has kind of been in dispute for a while and we haven't been out to change it. And I think they might have submitted the lease to us, and within the lease, it said the area that was rented by the tenant we have assigned by that space, and it's what's in our system is too high. And it also had a like a building plan of the main floor. And when I was reviewing that, I saw 3 spaces. I didn't see 4, so I think that's the basement.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, and I have no questions, so you can proceed, Mr. Story.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we have a mixed-use commercial residential property. Broadly, we would call this Central Park. It's right behind 360 Cumberland, which is that big apartment tower that faces right onto the park. I note that I have my class codes reversed on my first page, so please be cognizant of that, where we've got the wrong class code on the wrong income stream. So it should actually be our CC. Oh no, sorry, no, we're correct. Sorry about that. Okay, we do indeed have 3 units on the main floor. I have photos in my brief starting on page 4. You'll see there's a long-term tenant. It's an acupuncturist. He's been there for many years. He was historically on month-to-month leases. I believe that's been more formalized now. That is Dr. Pan, the acupuncturist. That's on the far left. In the middle section, we have what I will call an alternative school. So I believe the lease that Mr. Brokus was discussing was likely sent to him as part of our request for class code and liability adjustment in the previous cycle, based on the fact that that space is tenanted by an alternative school under the purview of I believe it's the Winnipeg School Division. And then on the far right, we have Mercado Restaurant, which is an Ethiopian restaurant. And we, now I haven't been there for this cycle, but we have always treated that Mercado space a little differently than a typical restaurant. It's not a licensed restaurant. It's next to a school, obviously. So that would be challenging to have a liquor license next to a school. And it doesn't have the typical HVAC venting and loading capabilities of a typical restaurant. So we treat that unit as simply as a commercial unit, and that actually makes the property a little bit easier to deal with, as opposed to splitting out those separate streams. We treat the entire main floor as simply a commercial space, because it is not fit up like a typical restaurant. Okay, so ultimately, the rents that we have on file from the owner are higher than the model, so we don't have a dispute with the assessor in terms of the rents being applied. Vacancy is not in dispute either. Mr. Broka said or had mentioned that for properties like this, typically we'll see the expenses recorded in a manner that's blended, so it is very difficult to tease out the different allocations. So based on the structural age of 1912, we have stabilized the expenses at 60%. That's typically what we would expect to see. That's the low end of what we would expect to see. So I have used 60%. You'll typically see that we'll stabilize anywhere in situations like this, anywhere from 60 to up to 75%, but I've capped the expenses and stabilized them at 60%. I think that's reasonable given the structural age of 1912. It is a wood or steel frame building. It does not have heritage designation at this stage. It does not have amenities. It doesn't have parking. We determined that the suite mix would be considered reasonably good, so that's a positive. But the location is clearly a challenge. So, and that's going to be a running theme for many of the properties that we see today. I believe all of them will have locational issues that we've considered in our application of the cap rate. So ultimately, the city's NOI by the model is 115,286 for the class code 20 for the multifamily section. We calculate 107,988, and that again is due to the higher expense ratio that we've applied. And then the cap rate. So the model is coming out at 5.35. We believe that to be aggressively low for a property such as this, of this vintage in this area. So you can see on our chart, Mr. Chair, on page 18, we've summarized our cap rate study, which has been provided to you in full. Typically, for good properties in good locations, built before 1946, our range is generally 6.1 to 6.6. So at 6.25, we're slightly higher. So we're recognizing the fact that the building was it was converted, so there was work done to it. It's not true to its 1912 vintage, but we do have the issue of the location being right on Central Park. So clearly our perspective is any investor investing in some of these areas that are in the core would recognize that there's a higher degree of risk and would require a higher rate of return. So in this instance, we applied a cap rate of no less than 6.25%, leading us to an indicated market value on the class code 20 stream of 1,728,000. So 1,727,811, which we then round to 1,728,000. In terms of the commercial valuation, we've used 4,717. I believe that is no longer in dispute. We have semi-gross leases that indicate $12.43. However, again, they are semi-gross. So when we look at the assessor's overall blended rent of $11.50 per foot, we're okay with that based on $12.43 semi-gross. So we will apply $11.50 per foot. I did mention in my report here that the Ethiopian Cafe is treated as a commercial rental unit. It does not have typical finishes such as loading, venting, and HVAC. And then those center units are the Wiwa Baguni School, which is an alternative high school that's under, or alternative school that's under the purview of the Winnipeg School Division. I've also provided to you for the purpose of our exercise today our retail capitalization rate study. That has been summarized on page 22. We're suggesting to you that low quality retail on the low end should range between 7.5% to 8.5%. Again, we do have that locational issue, but we do have a strong covenant with the Winnipeg School Division in the center. So we haven't gone on to the very high end at 8.5. We are recognizing the challenges, but we're also recognizing the positives, and the strength of covenant is certainly a good thing with that center unit. So we've applied 8% in our commercial valuation for the retail portion. So that leads us to an indicated market value of 574,682, which we then round to 575. And once again, that's based on an NOI of 45,975. With a cap rate of 8%. And again, that is squarely in the middle of what I'm going to call lower quality retail space. And that higher cap rate should be based on the overall structural age of the property as well as the location. So I feel very comfortable in that regard. So ultimately, with all that being said, we are requesting board adjust the assessment today to $2,303,000. It's the rounded value, and once again, that is based on 1,728,000 on the class code 20 and 575 on class code 60, the commercial section. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions, and I thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Baracus?
Yeah, just a couple. I mean, I also have like a rebuttal to the cap rate. I know at this point we've all seen it before. So I just ask that it be applied to this property and the other properties on the docket in regards to our disagreement.
We'll deal with the rebuttal after all the questions have been heard.
Oh, and Mr. Chair, I should point out, I submitted my rebuttal as well. So if we want to deal with that all on the front end, that's fine.
Okay, we'll deal first with your rebuttal after the questions on the main brief, and then the assessor's rebuttal. Okay. So, okay, questions, Mr. Baracus? Any further ones?
Yeah, thanks. Would it be fair to say that this property, while close to Central Park, doesn't actually back onto it?
Well, no, it doesn't back right onto it, but it backs onto the back alley behind 360 Cumberland. So it's right at Central Park. So I mean, yes, there's 360 Cumberland is in front of it. It backs onto that back alley. I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but it is certainly influenced by the that area. It is firmly in the area at Central Park.
Would you agree that this building kind of falls just outside what would be referred to as the Exchange District?
I think it's in Central Park. I don't think anybody would consider this the Exchange District necessarily. I think if you if you were to go as far as say well, I think the theater is probably the end of the Exchange District. You might broadly say that the Yellow Dog is kind of close to it. I think you have that as a rent comp, and that would be stretching it. So no, I don't think this is in the Exchange District.
Okay. And then do you have any photographs or anything of the restaurant area in regards to some of the, I guess, unique aspects of it you were mentioning about the HVAC or anything like that we can take a look at?
No, I don't. I haven't inspected. I've been there. It's sort of call it more of a mom and pop type place. It's not a chain restaurant, obviously. It's a independent. So, but no, I don't have photos of that. But you can certainly see that just by looking through the photos, it doesn't have typical loading, which is pretty much essential for most restaurants. But and we don't have HVAC and we don't have venting. And I did check to see. I didn't see any permits that would have changed things since our last submission. So I feel comfortable saying that it is not fit up like a typical restaurant.
And just in regards to that commercial area, have you been in the basement? Is that something that the school has like access to, or just?
No, I actually I don't know about the basement, but what I would say, and it would be good to inspect it and just get the record corrected so we don't have to change it at hearing all the time. But if you've spent much time in these heritage buildings, typically the basement from 1912 is not going to be, it'll likely be considered substandard. And I don't see any, well, I don't want to say it, but I would be surprised if there was adequate fenestration. If there is a basement down there, it's probably best used for, let's call it cold storage or something like that. It would be substandard, I would imagine, but I haven't been there, so I can't say.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like just a little clarification on the restaurant. So it doesn't have the sort of exhaust fans and whatever that a normal restaurant would have?
That's correct. That was our understanding. Yeah, it doesn't have the typical HVAC, the typical venting, or again the loading that we would expect to see in a typical restaurant.
Okay, I'm just wondering if that meets standards, but whatever. Okay, I have no more questions, so thank you very much on that property. We will now move to 644 Portage.
You want to deal with the rebuttals?
Oh, the rebuttals. Yes, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I'm ahead of my time again. Okay, your rebuttal, Mr. Story.
Sure. Just very quickly, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Brokus has pointed out that you've all heard this before, and I appreciate that, so I will be expedient. So we looked at the...
Well, Mr. Chair, could I interject?
Oh.
I don't think we have the rebuttal.
Yeah, I guess technically we're supposed to adjourn and recess rather, and then consider whether to accept the rebuttal or not.
Mr. Chair, if I may, we don't need to recess for the rebuttal as well. It should be in the OneDrive folder. I shared it this morning.
Oh, okay. Let me just look that up then and open the OneDrive.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, applicant's rebuttal. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Story.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Okay, so ultimately our first point of contention here, and I had mentioned it, is that we've not been able to review the calculations that have been applied, and we're not certain as to whether or not these sales have been used in the model to determine the the actual output. So that's point number one. But secondly, we do note that at the reference date, the interest rate was 4.5%. So based on just the simple economic principle that would act in your own best interest, it doesn't make sense that one would dispose of an asset with a return rate of 4.5% or less if a GIC, for example, would return 4.5% on the at the reference date. And I believe it's safe to say that we would have known at the reference date that those rates were climbing. So anything below 4.5% is somewhat suspect to us, and we would need to see some calculation to determine if that's viable. Now, ultimately, some folks might hold investments for a longer time, and that interest rate may be temporal. However, if the point of the exercise is to determine what a knowing buyer, a knowing purchaser would have transacted at the reference date, it would be unlikely from our position that they would transact below 4.5%. We've included the Bank of Canada rate for you there. We note, of course, that 727 Sargent, that's the city indicator number 1, and 241 Young are both below that level, so we don't consider them to be viable cap rates. 459 Sargent, it appears that the city has used historical income in their calculation. We did have the opportunity to pull the MLS listing, and it does state that an investor would expect an annual potential gross income of 101,142, which is an average monthly rent of only $740 per unit per month, with $40 per stall per month for 5 stalls and parking. So it's our position that the purchaser would have based their purchase price on the income stream that was known at the time of sale that they would have been hoping to achieve or projecting to achieve. If you recalculate the cap rate with those rents that are indicated at the time of sale, that cap rate becomes 5.79%, and that is in line with our study. We've included that workup on page 5 of the rebuttal. And then I've also included the MLS listing at the very close to the bottom. It says gross income 101,142. So that has been we've looked that up and applied that as we're trying to determine what a knowing purchaser would have been reviewing at the time of purchase, and this listing certainly would have been germane to that decision. 150 Hendon. We've not seen the stabilization from the city, but we did have the opportunity to speak with the vendor and the purchaser. So we were able to interview them based on, or sorry, not the vendor, but the purchaser rather. So we were able to speak with them regarding upon what figures they based their purchase price, and they were kind enough to provide us with the RTB documents that indicate that as at the time of purchase there was known applications to increase the rents in play. So the RTB orders have an effective date of June 1, 2021, which is the possession date. So we've included that, and they were kind enough to provide us a number of the orders for each type of unit. So those are included here. We've also recalculated that cap rate or calculated that cap rate rather, and provided the workup for you on page 8 of my rebuttal, and we determined that that's a 5.42 cap. The RTB orders are there for your perusal. And then ultimately we've talked about Maryland a little bit. Now this is a property that I've handled personally for the last 3 owners. So I agree that there's some blips in the reporting, to be certain, but the current owner provided us the workups that he was upon which he based his purchase price, and so we've included that here. Now that's a much older building. That cap rate is much higher at 7.11. So we've included that for you as well, and of course 2390 McPhillips. And you've heard this many times, but we believe that the purchaser would have based their purchase price on the potential to increase the rents rather than the rents in place, as the rents in place at the time of purchase were below CMHC. Now, I know that the assessor has said, well, if that were the case, you may have to adjust the expenses, and that very well may be. But certainly the cap rate that's being put forth by the city we believe to be too low, as it's based on the historic NOI, which again was below market by all accounts, and raised upon acquisition. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. But that is our rebuttal to the assessor's cap rate, and would ask that it continues carries forward to the balance of the briefs on our docket today.
Okay, questions, Mr. Brockes, on the rebuttal?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, questions?
Have any questions? Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre.
I have one question.
Sure.
So on your rebuttal, have you
Yep.
inspected any of these comps that the assessor brought forward?
No, that's a good question. No, I haven't. I've been inside 2390 McPhillips. Sorry, before I say no completely. No, I have not inspected the interiors. Well, I have inspected 677 Maryland a number of times. So yes, that I have done a full inspection on. 2390, I've been inside, but I wouldn't call it an inspection. It's just sort of having a look around on an open house type thing.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, 459 Sergeant. Okay, it says gross income of 101, 142. Was there an order from the RTB for an above rate increase, or
I'm
why
not sure.
why is using the historic wrong?
Right. So, okay, if we go to, okay, so if we go to their income and expense, basically their potential gross rents, Mr. Chair, from 2019, 2020, and 2021 are escalating, 82,000, 84,400, 87,200. So we don't have they're not our clients, so I don't have the opportunity necessarily to ask them for those orders. But we don't think that the escalation that is being reported on the MLS is out of line. In fact, it's I think I said it's only $770 or something like that per month. So those rents were not extremely high. But yeah, no. To answer your question, I don't have an RTB order on that. But that escalation does not appear to be out of line to us from our perspective. So that is, we're trying to put ourselves in the mind of a purchaser, and if that's what's being put to them, I think it's reasonable that they would have based their purchase price on that figure.
Well, it seems considerably higher than the historic has been.
Well, it's
Yeah.
so it's
It could
740.
be the seller putting the best possible face on the product.
Potentially, but just to be very clear, 740 a month is pretty low at 2021 or 22. So I appreciate what you're saying, but if they were suggesting that you might be able to achieve $1,000 a month, we might say, well, hold on, that might be excessive. But that figure of 97,680 that we've applied in our workup is, again, it's $740 a month for a one bedroom. So that seems to be exactly where it ought to be.
Well, I guess that's debatable. It seems to be increasing at the rate of allowed increases and nothing more, about 2% a year, it seems, or less. Okay, whatever. It's not a debate here. All right. Thank you for that. Then we will now have the city's rebuttal.
Okay. Let me know when is everyone ready?
I don't have a copy in front of me.
It's sent to you through email, Mr. Sawyer.
Oh, okay, perfect.
I just can't technically send it until it is brought up.
Okay, perfect. So sorry, Tristan, I'm just waiting for it to land in my mailbox. Is that?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Should be sent from my end.
Okay, got it now.
Okay. It's, I mean, judging by the familiar faces, it's the same as we've had in the past few weeks, at least for the rebuttal here. Basically, our contention is just that for a few of these sales here, sales 1 through 3, they only have 1 year of income and expense information utilized to stabilize an NOI to come up with a cap rate on the sale price, and also how the historical income was stabilized higher based on like a sales brochure or like an MLS listing, which I wouldn't consider as reliable as the historical performance of the property. And then the 4th sale here on Maryland, again, they don't have any actual data, but that's something that they're using to calibrate their cap rate chart. And then the last sale here on 2390 McPhillips, there's just a difference in how the income was stabilized. Again, we use the historical actuals. They used the CMHC, and it is true that the rent did go up after the sale. It didn't go up as much as the applicant has stabilized at. I think it was in the 1.5 million range, and the expenses also went up too. So, I mean, not as applicable to this docket just based on the ages of the property, but that's just something that there is a disagreement on for 2390 McPhillips. I'll just leave it there. Everyone's heard this before. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Questions, Mr. Story?
Sorry, so Mr. Brokus, you mentioned the stabilized, but can we agree that the direction from the Appraisal Institute suggests that direct capitalization considers a stabilized first year of net operating income? So it doesn't actually say that that stabilization ought to be done by a 3-year. It simply says that you're to take the information and to create a stabilized single year. Is that your understanding?
I mean, it's that I don't have that in my rebuttal, but in terms of what I would consider reliable, because I know expenses do fluctuate year to year. In order to kind of have more confidence, I myself need a better kind of quality of data than just 1 year.
Okay, and in terms of the Lady Joyce, sorry, you're suggesting that so I'm just going to pull it up. Your NOI was around 940 or something like that. Or sorry, 914, 913, 395.
Yes.
With a sale price of 19.4. Did you ever see the marketing circular that went out on that property?
I believe I've seen it.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that marketing circular, and whether you think it's too high or whatever, what was put to the market was an NOI of about 940, correct?
Well, I don't have that in my document, so I can't comment on it.
Okay, but if indeed that rent increased, just mathematically, the cap rate would also increase as well, correct?
If the expenses didn't change, which they did.
Okay.
So it's kind of like if one, you can't like kind of look at the future for one, but keep the other compartment in the past. So I think that's kind of where our disagreement lies.
Okay. And we won't be able to see the workup with the new adjusted expenses, correct?
Well, I mean, that's something that happened like after the sale, so I wouldn't put as much weight on that. I'm looking at the figures that were on the table at the time. I know that if they were planning a rent increase, they'd also be forecasting an expense increase as well. So I'm just staying with what I have before.
And the Lady Joyce, that property was built in 2015, correct?
Yep.
And so anybody would presumably expect those expenses to start climbing after the first, call it 8 or 10 years, correct?
I mean, yeah. I mean, when you look at the expenses here, you know, 17, 18 are lower, and then they're starting to tick up in 19.
Right.
And yeah, that's just what happens as the building gets older.
Yep. Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Okay, questions, Ms. Anderson, on the rebuttal?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
All right, let's just take a short break here. I should actually should phone the heating company, find out why they're not here yet. So, if we can take a break till 10 o'clock, and then we'll resume with the other properties. Thank you. All right, thank you. Welcome back. We will now move to 644 Portage Avenue. So, Mr. Brockus, you can begin your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. File 24-1518, roll number 12090592-100. 644 Portage Avenue, total assessment 3,974,000. There's two lines of valuation. There's the commercial and the residential. It's 1909. We don't have an effective year built on it. No indoor parking, 21 outdoor parking spots. 40 suites in total. Page 2, request for income information hasn't been an issue. On page 3, I see there's 33 one-bedroom, 8 two-bedroom, 41 units in total. Average monthly rent just under $800. Just glancing ahead for the apartment, we're pretty darn close in terms of NOI. So it's predominantly a cap rate issue. Just under 5 3/4 on the cap as per the model. Only 76,000 a unit. We've got our retail here with our model parameters comes up to 840,000. Subject property breakdown on the income and premises is on page 4. So we've got 3 retail premises. This last one, I noticed yesterday when I was reviewing that there's a disparity in terms of the size that's assigned to this area from the applicant and what we have, and what's on the lease, and actually what we have on a fit-up permit from 2016, which I'm going to submit just as a rebuttal after to show the source of that extra area for that space. It seems like there's a basement space that has been fit up for that tenant, though, the West Broadway outreach, I believe it is. So I mean, I think that part of the discussion will be there. Total annualized net rent 78,236 in the retail. Page 5 shows the rent comparables. It's cap rate issue mostly on that stream, so I'm not gonna dive into that. We got our comparable leases here on page 6. Cap rate evidence on page 7 and 8 is the table. The overall table is at page 7 as opposed to support. Page 9 is the excerpts. And then you can see on page 10 here, so the income and expenses for the 2 streams are combined. They can't be separated, or they haven't been separated, and there's no real way to do it, so just on the model. So here you can see that when you look at the rent roll, you might have to zoom in a bit. It's good that everyone's on a computer today. On the first one, that says rent roll lease charges, it says lease type retail net for all of them. And when you add up the amount on the far side, it comes out to 84,384. We're at 78. So I don't think we're overstepping here, given that they're declaring that the lease types are net. And so that middle stream here, West Broadway Youth Outreach, they're reporting 2,068. But I don't think they're including the basement, because the permit I found yesterday I'm going to submit just as rebuttal to clarify that what we have assigned in our model is indicative of what we've been told that's been fit up for their purpose. So regardless of the area, it looks like based on the rent, the net rent and the lease type, that we're not overstepping anyway, regardless of what the square footage is. So should be okay in that regard. Then we've got just a picture of the outside of the building, and then just an overall kind of a handwritten what's included in the residential. So just went with the model on this one. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Story?
Quick question. So, Mr. Brokus, you'd mentioned those commercial rents were net. Where are you seeing that?
So if you go to page 10.
Yep.
And then in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
it says rent roll lease charges, and you're probably
Yeah,
have to zoom in. So it says lease type. On the third column from the left, it says retail net.
okay. I see what you're saying. If you look right below that, though, they're showing you that those are gross leases, correct? If you look on the INE, annual property tax, so tax and CAM, they're saying that's included in the rent. So that means it's a gross rent, right?
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. Is it seems like it's inconsistently reported, where they're saying this is, in one hand they're saying net, but then there's also indications that it's gross. I don't know if
Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
their system, but maybe it would say triple net if it were, if those charges were included. I'm not sure, but can we agree based on the submission of the on the INE, they're showing that those that property tax and CAM and tax is included in the base rent, correct?
I mean, yeah, that's what they put in. It's kind of, it's unclear.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, now just to jump around too much here, but based on this, the apartment valuation is model derived, you said. Does the model consider heritage designation, and does it apply any premium to the cap rate when a property has a heritage designation?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay, can we agree that heritage properties are properties that have a heritage designation, have different considerations when it comes to renovation and protected elements that ought not to be altered? You aware of that?
Yeah, from my understanding, there's like a extra committee they got to run it through to see what sort of changes they may or may not be able to make on the property.
Precisely. And with that being the case, then would you agree with me that heritage properties, when they are to be renovated, that would all of that would effectively lead to potentially higher costs and a longer timeline to renovate or adjust any of those elements that are permitted to be adjusted through the, like you rightly said, the heritage permitting process?
Again, I'm not familiar with the process's timelines, other than knowing that it does apply to these types of properties. So I could see that in some cases being true.
Right, and it is a notice on title that basically is effectively like a caveat on title. Is that your understanding? It runs with the property, not with the owner. So if you were to sell a property, okay, perfect. Okay. Okay, so those are my questions on the class code 20. Now, can you agree with me that this property, the retail, the main floor retail space, has been about 30% vacant for some time, since about 20, I think it's 15 or 16. You aware of that?
I do not have that within my submission, no.
Okay. It's interesting because the Hakim Optical signage has been there for many years since they've left. And sorry, you were suggesting that the permit for the West Broadway Youth Outreach, that's so that they are permitted to use the basement along with the main floor. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically what it was is like the last one, when I reviewed these, I saw we had different areas. So I was trying to clear that up for this morning. And unlike the other one where I had like an actual like typed out long, like official signed lease. And also like a building plan. I didn't have that for this, but I do have a permit from 2016, which explicitly says occupancy for the main floor and basement and the tenant area matching what we have.
Right. Okay, so I see now that area is 2390. That's 2390, but the monthly rent has not changed, correct?
No, I haven't made any like adjustments or
Oh,
anything.
no. What I mean by that is if you look at, and you have to zoom in on that rent roll where it says Winnipeg School Division. Oh, I'm sorry. We're looking at, no, okay. So Winnipeg School Division is showing us a leased area of 1950, but on the rent roll, they're showing 2390, but the monthly rental amount has not changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're just going with the model on that
Yeah.
one. Our rates are much lower and
Yeah.
it is inclusive of like space in the basement as well. And I apologize for not having this permit in my main submission. I'm in such a rush getting these in. Sometimes I don't know where our differences are
Yeah.
until I review the evidence like the night before.
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. Okay, I think so. Just very quickly, I will try and make sure we don't use the wrong square footage, but it doesn't look as though the income being generated has changed. So the rate per foot is going to change, but the overall quantum, it's going to be a cap rate issue ultimately. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I will leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Questions, Mr. McIntyre?
Just one, you're showing on your first page an an actual year built of 1909 and an effective year built of 1909. Is there, unlike the previous one where we had an age variant, I guess two questions in this is, has this been inspected lately?
Not to my knowledge. It has not. I have not been in it.
Would you agree that the 1909 effective year is not realistic?
Definitely, definitely not realistic.
Okay, that was my only question. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Story, you can proceed.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so this is the Casa Loma building. It's a grade 2 heritage property. Of course, that's just into my description here. Right. Okay, so we are originally built in 1909. This is the property I'd mentioned incorrectly in the previous, that my CC60 and CC20 are reversed, and that's on my page 2. So I will note that and ask that you be aware of that, please. So again, we're at the corner of Portage and Sherbrooke, mixed use building from 1909. We have a grade 2 heritage designation on the property. This is unique because there's wainscoting in one of the hallways or the stairwells, I believe. And then there's also Murphy beds, original Murphy beds, those beds that fit into the wall and come down. Those are considered protected elements in this building. So it is grade 2 heritage. Those are the protected elements. I believe we have the write-up in here as well. So ultimately, deal with the class code 20 first. We are slightly higher than the assessor on the NOI. In this case, once again, Mr. Chair, we've capped the expenses at 60%. I think that's very reasonable. It's a very conservative estimate for a building that's over 100 years old. But again, as Mr. Barocas pointed out in the last 2 files, it's very difficult to tease out those expenses exactly. So we've applied a 60% expense ratio, and we're still coming in at a slightly higher NOI than the city. In this instance, we have applied a 6.25% cap rate, and that is with consideration to the age and the heritage designation. So Mr. Barocas quite rightly pointed out in my questioning that the heritage designation comes with a separate set of permitting rules. So all permits have to go through a separate permitting division. There are different considerations. It does typically take a fair bit longer. It is more costly. And in some cases, you are only permitted to use certain contractors for elements such as windows and doors and masonry and repointing and brickwork and that sort of thing. So we do believe that the cap rates ought to be adjusted. Typically, we use an adjustment of 25 to 50 basis points to recognize the heritage designation and some of those added expenses that can be expected going forward. So ultimately, the assessor has, or the model has, suggested a value of $3,134,000. We are suggesting $2,929,000, and again, that's based on a slightly higher NOI of $183,083, and capitalized with a 6.25% capitalization rate. Again, that leads us to $2,929,328, which we then round to $2,929,000 for the class code 60. Okay, so ultimately we've got well, we're using an 8.25 cap. I don't believe that to be in dispute. We have used a leased area of 6,252. But now the assessor has used, let's see here. Sorry, I'm just let up. I understand now that we're considering the basement space. So ultimately, we've applied rents that are very close, but in this case, based on that discrepancy in the basement, I'm just going to ask that the class code 60 be confirmed for our purposes today until we can determine the appropriate square footage to use. We're using the same 8.25 cap, and we've generally accepted the rental indicators. So until we can determine the appropriate square footage, I don't want to misrepresent it. So we'll ask that simply be confirmed for today's exercise, Mr. Chair. And so that leaves us simply with the class code 20, which once again we suggest ought not to exceed $2,929,000, and that is once again based on a slightly higher NOI and a cap rate that is reflective of the original structural age, as well as that heritage designation. So I'll leave my presentation there, and I thank you.
Okay. Questions, Mr. Brockesy?
I don't, but I'll show you guys the permit afterwards so everyone has it just to see where I'm coming from on the commercial. No questions, thank you.
Okay. So Ms. Anderson, questions?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. So the total assessment then that you're proposing?
Right. So if we're accepting the 840 and then adding in the 2,000,000.
3,769,000.
3,769,000. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. And my other question is, on the agenda, it indicated that the liability and classification were also under appeal.
Yes. So in this case, we have the Winnipeg School Division, and then we also have the West Broadway Youth Outreach. So we'll just ask that those items be confirmed as part of the class code 60, and we'll review those further, and we can speak to Mr. Brokus in the multifamily group about any exemptions from taxation based on those premises qualifying as seminaries of learning. That's would be our position. So for today, we'll leave that until we can sort of parse out the appropriate square footage, and then once that is all taken care of, we can speak to the department about any potential exemptions for those two tenants.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
All right. Okay. All right, Mr. McIntyre. Did I ask you? All right.
No, but Miss Anderson took my only question about liability and classification.
Well, thank you for catching that. I looked at the table of contents, but not the specific individual ones already. I'm gonna have to learn to do that. Okay, we should have dealt with liability and classification first. Okay, and I have no questions, so thank you very much for that.
You want to see the permit, just so maybe
Oh
we can
yes, the
for
permit,
Jared
yes.
to have it and everyone to
Yep.
see.
Yep.
I have it here, Matt, in our
Oh, you do?
folder,
Okay,
but yeah, so we can talk about it after. But yeah, no, I
okay,
see what you're getting at with it. Yeah.
all good. Then I won't bother talking about it. If you guys have it, it's kind of evident you asked for confirmation. So all good.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to 25 Furby.
One moment, please.
Yeah, I gotta open the files myself. Okay, whenever you're ready on 25 Furby.
Sounds good, thank you. Okay, so file number 24-3296, roll number 1209752240, 25 Furby, Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation. We've got two lines. We've got an exempt space. I believe that's daycare, and we've also got the multifamily space, 1986, 5 stories, 43 suites, only 25 on-site outdoor parking spots. Page 2, I mean, no recent sale history. They did send it, but they sent it in a spreadsheet. This is something that we've discussed in terms of the en masse, what they have to submit to us. So it's not a compliance issue here, is what I'm saying. On page 3, just shows the workup. It's 31 2-bedroom, 12 3-bedroom, 43 units total. Look, just streamline things, looking at the applicant's brief. We have the same effective gross income, so it's mostly the expenses and the cap rate on this one. So what we have here is the modeled cap rate is 5 3/4. So that's about 89,000 a unit. These are 2 bedrooms and 3-bedroom units, so they are kind of on the mid to upper 50% size of available bedroom units. No bachelors, no ones. Now you got our market income on page 4, comps on page 5. Comparable leases on page 6. So we have our CMHC rent analysis on page 7 and 8. It shows we're about 67% of the rents. Again, rents are not in dispute on this one. And also keeping in mind for like Centennial, there are a few renovated ones as well. That would push that up. So it does look low, but again, rents are not in dispute, so I'm not going to belabor this. And then the corresponding tables are on page 9. Cap rates are on page 10 and 11. And then just rounding out before we get to the pictures, there's a couple of permits. There's one for 1.5 million in July of 2022. Exterior work including balcony and railing repairs, balcony hollow core crack repairs, replace exterior storefront repairs through sidewalk entry, installation of drip flashing, general maintenance and repair of roof electrical being done. So this is like a bunch of work that I would not really consider it like something that's gonna like improve the building. It's just a bunch of maintenance that needed to be due all around the same time, and they did it all at once. So it looks like for at least the outside, they're definitely keeping up with it based on the size of the permit. And then we've got another permit 2013, so this is a lot older, just the interior alteration of the daycare. New vents, drywall, door renovations, fire alarms, and cosmetic alterations. So it does look like, you know, what's great about housing is that they do take out permits, so it's more clear to kind of like track what's going on. So that this property is like Furby and Cornish, so it is in the I guess like the more Wolseley part of Furby. And then there's a picture of the outside there. I don't have any interior photographs. So just running it back to page 3, I think based on the bedroom count and the overall market value per suite, I think we're pretty good. You could look at the cap rate and say, oh, that might be a bit on the lower side, but ultimately the resulting valuation on a market value per suite, I think taken into consideration like the location of it as well, like it's more in like the Wolseley part of Furby, not the other end. I think we're okay. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Story?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Broke, as you mentioned, this is Wolsey a number of times, but we agree that this is West Broadway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I look on my page 15,
Mhm.
It looks like, I mean, like Wolseley Avenue's right there, Sherbrooke's right there. I think of it more as Wolseley when I ride my bike through that area.
Okay. And the city record indicates that it is West Broadway though, correct? So that's what the model would be drawing on, I'm guessing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to like think of it as just like the character of that. Like
Right.
it's one street over from, you know, Sherbrooke. So
Yeah, so it's sort of in an interesting position because on one side you have Eastgate, Westgate, Middlegate, and on the other side you're into like the 100 block of Furby, Langside, that kind of thing. So it's kind of unique in that way. Okay, that's fine. And this is all modeled, correct?
yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yep. And that last permit, doesn't have application or discussion today. That's for the daycare, which is fully exempt and has no bearing. Okay. And yeah, I agree. You mentioned that cap rate seems low. Now, this is a Manitoba housing property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the model, and it's a family housing asset, correct?
Yes. It's
Okay.
not like a bunch of bachelors or anything.
Right. And in fact, it has no bachelors and no ones,
Yeah.
like you said. So that would be, can we agree that that would be generally atypical, particularly in the, whether you want to call it West Broadway or Wolseley, we would expect to see more bachelor one-bedroom units as a general comment. Is that fair?
Usually there's some component of that
Right.
based on the demographic of the area.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And that modeled, or the expense rate, that's modeled as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you have a chance to look through the, I know you didn't include it here because Manitoba Housing has to supply all of their stuff in a huge data dump or whatever. So were you
Yeah.
able to look at the history of the INEs to determine if your expense ratio was reasonable?
No, I don't look at the actuals they submit because they're not running it on a for-profit basis. So
Right.
I mean, we got this peg down to core in our model to try to encapsulate that there might be a few more dents and dings in it and utilitarian aspect of it, but we just kind of adjust it down in our model.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I'll leave my comments to my presentation. Thank you.
All right, Mr. McIntyre, questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you can begin your presentation, Mr. Story.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we are indeed in West Broadway. We've established that we're on Furby, very close to Cornish. So again, that's West Broadway section. We would consider that the inner city. It was built in 1986. It is Manitoba Housing. It is an asset built by, not built by market factors, but rather built by policy in order to house low-income families. So that is why there is what we'll broadly call some obsolescences in terms of the suite mix. So from a market perspective, we would not consider that suite mix to be optimal given the area. So we have considered that. And I know you've all heard our presentation on social housing in the past, but effectively we adjust the cap rates for social housing based on a number of factors: condition, age, low-income tenancy is one factor that is put forth in the guiding text by Mr. Richard Polton, the American appraiser who wrote the book on how we ought to determine values for these properties. And effectively, his advice is to determine a baseline cap rate and then adjust upward for the presence of the elements that are unique to these income-limited properties. In this case, we've not made a huge adjustment. The age is not, I mean, 1986 is just around 40 years old, 38 years old. We do have a wood frame building. We're considering the condition to be substandard, and that's generally typical of social housing assets that are a little bit older. And that suite mix is not ideal, as I've mentioned. Parking coverage is less than 1-to-1, which becomes inflamed when you have larger suites. So if you have slightly below 1-to-1 with bachelors and 1-bedrooms, that's less of a concern from our perspective than when you have 2- and 3-bedroom units, as you can imagine. So ultimately, we have used a cap rate of 5.75 on this property. I'd mentioned that we have a history of the expenses. If you follow me, please, to my page 19. In 2020 and 2022, you can see that those expenses, in 2020, they were running at $320,801. In 2022, they were $293,780. Now we recognize that there is that daycare, though the daycare is quite small. So the 253,817 applied by the model we believe to be too low. So I've applied 60% again as best practice as you'll see a number of times throughout this docket today. So I've applied expenses that are lower than the actuals, but slightly higher than the assessor. The assessor made the comment that they're not running it on a for-profit basis, and I understand that, and that's simply why we don't use the rents that are being achieved, as they are rent geared to income. You can see again in 2020, the effective gross rents they were generating were between 164 and 175. We would certainly never use that. We've used the same rate as the assessor at 455,850, but we're not of the opinion that Manitoba Housing is running these properties without consideration to expenses and without trying to mitigate those expenses. So we're not using the actuals, but I've used 60%. And I think that's quite fair and reasonable for the purpose of our exercise today. So with that being said, our NOI comes to 182,350. We capitalize that at a rate of 5.75, leading to an indicated market value of 3,171,297, which we then round to 3,171,000. Again, this is basically just an appeal based on the expenses. We believe the model expenses are too low, and the cap rate is very, very low at only 5.25. That would be a low cap rate for a market apartment from my perspective. So we have adjusted to 5.75. And that is our presentation. Again, it is a social housing, family housing asset, and we've tried to make adjustments based on the site-specific nature of the property. So ultimately, our request today, Mr. Chair, is a value of $3,480,000, and that's based only on an adjustment to the class code 20. And I'm happy to take your questions.
Any questions, Mr. Brockes?
Just in regards to the cap on page 17, did you adjust it because it's being run as subsidized housing?
Yeah, we consider subsidized housing. We consider a number of factors, but so we've talked a bit about what I'm going to call obsolescences. So when a property is built for the purpose of social housing, it's built by policy and not by market factors. So, and I think we agree that if a private investor were to develop a property like this, you would likely see a suite mix that's more balanced. It would include some one bedrooms, some bachelors. So we consider that. We consider that there's no history of economic profit, so that's a condition issue. I've not made an adjustment for location in this instance. We've agreed that we don't have an issue with location. It's not in the 200 to 400 block of Furby, but we do consider that it is a property that was built by policy as opposed to being built by market factors. So we have to consider that somewhere. So we would typically apply a cap rate of, I believe, 5.5, somewhere in the range of 5.5 to 6.25. In this case, we've used 5.75. So I think that's quite fair.
Okay, so just to be clear, and it's based more on the physical, you're saying, that's where your adjustment is coming from, not the fact that housing is providing them with like lower than market rents. Would that be a
No.
fair statement?
Yeah, no, we don't use the rents that they're actually generating. Obviously, they're rent geared to income. They're not based on, they're based on the there's a means testing process where indigent folks apply, and their rent is what's called rent geared to income. So it's based on their ability to pay, which is unique. So we don't use the rents that are being generated, but we do consider the actual expenses, and we will make adjustments if they do seem out of whack, which is what we've done here today. And the cap rate, we will adjust based on age, location, quality of tenant, income quality of tenant, which speaks to the durability of income. And that's basically what we've done today. So, but we also have to consider physical obsolescence. So as I think we both agree, this property has an atypical of market suite mix, and that is indeed based on the fact that it's used as a family housing asset. And you mentioned that they take more wear and tear, and that's certainly the case in family housing. So all of those factors have been considered in our application of an appropriate cap rate.
Okay, so it wouldn't make any difference, like say if I owned it and I had let people live there and I was subsidizing them. It's not like because it's a provincial owner.
Oh no, any social housing provider, there are a number. Obviously, Manitoba Housing would be the largest by an order of magnitude, but there are other social housing providers, and we would typically look to, it's the same methodology that you might use, where we would look to CMHC and adjust downward from the average, but the cap rate is considered on a site specific basis. So if you owned this specific property and it was built by Manitoba Housing for this specific purpose, then and you were achieving less than market rents, then we would apply the same cap rate. It's not based on the fact that it's Manitoba Housing; it's based on its use and its physical makeup.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, questions?
Yes, thank you. Thanks for your presentation. I'm wondering, have you inspected the property?
No, I have not had the opportunity.
Okay, so when on page 17 then, with regard to your cap rate evidence, and you indicate the condition is poor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's based on our file, but I have not inspected it, and I've not made a large adjustment for condition in this case. But so that's a very good point. We should inspect it soon, and I believe we will. But for the purpose of this exercise, we have not. I have noted that the condition would be substandard, but I have not made an adjustment because I can't speak to it personally or independently. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's my only question.
Mr. McIntyre.
Well, Miss Anderson took one of my questions. Thank you. My second question relates to page 17 at the top on the second part of the first sentence or second sentence. You indicated you were using a cap rate of 5.5%.
Yeah.
Oh.
That is a typo. Yes, I appreciate you catching that. I saw that too yesterday. So it should be 5.75.
Okay, thank you very much. That was all my questions.
All right, thank you. And I have no more questions. So we will move to 97 Keewatin. And let me open the proper files. Okay, Mr. Bruckus on 97, keep waiting.
Okay, thank you very much. File 24-2985, roll number 13090575000, 97 That's another Manitoba housing property. So it's got two lines of classification here. There's a school tax exempt commercial portion, rather an institutional portion that doesn't look like we're in dispute about. And then there's also the residential portion, total assessment 4747. So 1975 effective year bill is the same, 91 suites. They don't have any outdoor parking. Or so they have 6 outdoor parking, but comparatively, like to the unit count, like not very much at all. When you go to page 3, you can see that it's 81 bachelor and 10 one bedroom. So when I got to reviewing this one, I did see the 5.35 cap, which to me, even though it's 50,000 per unit, I do think that cap, based on the breakdown, like it's mostly a bachelor, especially with no parking. I think 5.5 cap would be a bit more appropriate. So I'm going to make a rec to adjust the, I'm going to adjust the residential portion using a 5.5 cap that calculates $4.465 million. And then when you add that to the 157, it's a small difference. That's 4,622,000. And again, that I think the cap should be a bit higher just based on the unit breakdown and doesn't have parking. So I do think that cap is a bit low. So I'll stop there and then I can keep going after.
Okay, how do you feel about the recommendation, Mr. Story?
Yeah, no, we're certainly closer, and I'd like to continue on, but I'll be very, very brief. We're still a little ways apart on that cap rate, but we're not worlds apart. So thank you. I'd like to continue, but I will again be very, very brief. Thank you.
Anything you wish to add, Mr. Bruckus?
Yeah, so just like, again, our rents are highly similar. So if we go down to sorry, the only really thing you guys haven't seen already, because the rents aren't really in dispute, would be the location of the property. It's on Keewatin near Alexander. You can see the outside of it. Windows are open here. I don't know if it has air conditioning or not. I don't think so. And then we've got a permit here on page, the last page of the brief from 2016, to the tune of $473,000. And then you have to zoom in a bit. So it is some interior and exterior alterations, cutting the basement level to the 11th floor and reconstructing suites with partitions and finishes. The medical clinic won't be altered, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. They did some alterations to the building envelope, upgrades, including new windows, doors, and roof. So I think based on bumping the cap to 5.5, I think that's pretty fair when you take it in totality that they have done some stuff in it, but also like considering its location and overall unit breakdown. So yeah, 4.622. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Story?
Yeah, just very quickly. Mr. Brokus, this would be considered a high rise, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and from what I understand, this cycle, it seems like high rises, or in some cases, have very high cap rates, and some of the low unit count assets have very low cap rates. Is that your understanding of how the model has sort of outputted some of these assessments?
I'm not sure. I haven't done a lot of high rises yet, but I've seen some high rise caps that I don't quite agree with, that I've had to make recs on actually bringing the cap down. So I'm just looking at 97 key weight on a per unit basis, and we're coming in at around 50,000 a unit. I think that's what we're
And sorry, your new recommendation for the apartment only was, what was that figure again? Sorry, I wrote.
Yeah, 4,465,000.
Okay, you know what? Mr. Chair, I think I'm okay with that, because if I look at my 6 and adjust to 5.75, we're almost bang on. So I think actually in hindsight, looking at the fact that we have a slightly higher NOI, I think we're okay with that. But Matt, I do want to discuss the commercial space with you offline, because I think it should be exempt, but we can talk about that after. But that rec it seems fine on further review. So I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so you're accepting the recommendation then?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on the recommendation, I guess, Mr. McIntyre?
Just one related to page, let me see. Page 14, there's a permit. It continues. And it basically says interior exterior alterations to 11-story 81 unit apartment building that includes gutting the basement, okay. And it includes mechanical, electrical, and plumbing.
That is correct.
Have you inspected this property?
I have not.
So we can't tell if this is a total reno or.
Well, I mean, based on their description, and it is a high declared construction value, but like typically, the based kind of on the use of the property, the rentals aren't usually, they're kind of very utilitarian. They're more replacements than, they're not putting in like granite or anything. It is Manitoba housing. So just from our experience, we've inspected a lot of them. Well, we're not really putting too much into it, and that permit was from 2016. So looking at 2015, that's almost 9 years ago. Take it what you will, but looks like there's some mechanical done as well.
But you will agree the permit's really not that old, considering it's a year built in 1975?
Yeah, considering, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Ms. Anderson.
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have no questions. Let's continue on and do one more property before taking another break. So let's do 425 Elgin. Hold it. No, sorry, 475 Sergeant.
Okay, just let me
Okay, just let me open the files too. Okay, on 425 Sergeant then.
okay, sounds good. File number 24-2883. Roll number 130519135 Sergeant. It's another housing property. We've got 2 lines of valuation, total assessed value of 5,166,000. We've got exempt institutional space, and then we also have the residential space. Again, just streamline things. It looks like rent isn't in dispute. We just have a difference in expenses and a difference in capitalization rate. 1987, 50 suites, 39 outdoor parking spots. Breakdown is on page 3. So it's 36 2-bedroom, 14 3-bedrooms. So more of a typical type mix, not kind of, all meant for like single occupancy bachelors, and a much better parking to suite ratio, so to speak. So with the 5.3 cap, we're coming out to 98,420. And then we see the expense ratio around 55%. We've got these pegged down in our model. So because we agree on income, pages 5 through 9 aren't really relevant going over. So we're going to skip over that. Then the cap rate stuff's on page 11 and 12. And then we have a picture of the outside of it on page 14. Then we got a permit from 2022 to the tune of 1.2 million. Exterior alterations, including windows and doors, interior ramps, site grading, and repair to the parking lot, and some electrical work. So they're investing in maintaining the assets. That's my evidence. Thank you.
All right, questions, Mr. Story?
Yes. So, Mr. Brokus, this is all model derived. There's been no manual adjustment to the output. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And were you able to review the income and expense for the purpose of our exercise today?
I did not review it.
Okay. Okay. And does the model, now this is interesting, where housing considers this Central Park, but I would consider this Spence because we're across Balmoral. But challenging location. Does the model contemplate the location? I know it used to provide a premium for certain areas, but does it still do that or no?
Yeah, to my knowledge, it does.
Okay. Okay. No, I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right. Questions, Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Story, then on your presentation.
Thank you, sir. So again, we are at the corner of Sargent and Balmoral. This is a social housing asset. It is family housing as well. And you can see by the suite mix that we have reported here as 36 2-bedroom and 14 3-bedroom. So in the inner city, we would generally expect to see some preponderance of bachelors in 1-bedrooms. In this case, we haven't, and that's based on the fact that it is used as a social subsidized family housing asset. Okay, so ultimately, I'd mentioned, so if you look on page 6 of my brief, you can actually see in the bottom right corner, there's a sign that says "Welcome to Central Park." So housing does consider this to be in the Central Park area. However, I think most of us would typically agree that Central Park more rightly starts once you cross Balmoral. However, Spence and Central Park, I would suggest you have similar considerations in terms of location. I have used a higher expense ratio, once again 60%. That is going to be a running theme for these properties today. I have had the opportunity to look at the history of expenses. So in 2020, expenses were recorded at 407,850. In 2022, they were recorded at 386,403. I've used 350,000, and that's capped at 60%. If you were to use the actuals, it would be somewhere closer to 67%. I noted in my comments. So that 60% expense ratio is more in line with what we'd expect to see. And once again, we're not of the opinion that housing is not trying to mitigate expenses as best they can, and that would be more common of what we would see of apartments in this area, and especially when we have what we'll call lower income rentals or rentals that tend to rent on the lower end of the scale. So with that said, we've applied a cap rate of 5.75. I think that's more reasonable given the location and given the that suite count. We do recognize that there has been work done, and Mr. Barocas has those permits, and that's right. They have redone the doors and windows. There's an interior ramp that was redone, and the parking lot has been done. So we've not over adjusted our cap rate. We're simply in the range where we would typically apply 5.5 for a property that was more typical of market, that didn't have these obsolescences such as these atypical suite mixes, and that would be a cap rate in what I would consider a good area. So we have to consider that this is a what I'll broadly call a challenging area for folks who are developing multifamily. So with that being said, 5.75 is well supported from our perspective. So we do respectfully submit that the value on the class code 20 be adjusted on that basis to 4,050,000, 4,050,000. The daycare center has a small assessment and it's completely exempt, so that's not in dispute for our purposes today. So our total request, Mr. Chair, is 4,295,000, and that again is based on that adjustment to the class code 20 of 4,050,000, 4,050,000. With that, I'm happy to take your questions, and I thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Barocas?
Have you inspected any of the units in this building?
No, I haven't had the chance.
To your knowledge, is there any thing that's really functionally different from like a size or layout perspective of the units that investor might not find attractive?
I think having a number of 3 bedrooms without any bachelors or 1 bedrooms would be atypical. I think it's probably not efficient. So the suite mix would be a consideration. So and perhaps that could be altered, but not without substantial cost. So based on the asset as it sits today, that would be considered, from our perspective anyway, an obsolescence. We don't typically see apartments that are market apartments in the inner city that have no bachelor or 1 bedroom units. That's just an atypical feature, but that's more common of family housing for social housing. So we would consider that an obsolescence.
Okay, and then just in regards to your expenses, do you have like the Manitoba Housing like source document where the expenses would, where your table, where are the expenses you could have in your table, where you got them from?
Yes, we have them on file. So yeah, we do have them.
But not in the submission today.
No, but I mean, you would have them too, but it's a huge, right? And it's a huge project document, so it's a little bit difficult, but the city does have them, and they do respond every year. So we would have the same information in that regard.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, let's take a break until let's see, 11:15, and come back and do our last 2 properties remaining. All right, thank you. Welcome back. Our next property is 425 Elgin. So, Mr. Barocas, you can begin.
Thank you. File 24-2553, roll number 130719060000. 425 Elgin, St. Andrew's Place. It's subsidized housing for seniors. There's a description at the very end of my brief showing how the rents are geared to gross income. So basically we've got 2 classifications here. Unless something's changed, there's no dispute in regards to the commercial 60 other and the institutional multifamily. The difference lies in the expenses in the cap. So I'll just tailor my presentation again to that. 1975, no effective year built, 116 suites, 14 outdoor parking spots. request for income information here. And not a problem. No recent sales, and we got a breakdown on page 3. So our income value summary, 98, bachelor, 17 one bedroom, for 160 units. So it is mostly those unit types, and there's only 14 outdoor parking. This cap is 4.45, and if you recall, 97 Keyway, and I did bump that one to 5.5. So we're right in the same cap rate range as where I bumped Keywayton to. So I didn't make a change in that regard because I noticed the market value per suite is only 51,000, which is right around what Keywayton was. So applying methodology consistently and looking at this on an overall value standpoint, I didn't see enough to make a change on it. So we've got our rent comparables and our CMHC study. You can see we are 68% of the rent for the area, zone, and year built. Taken year built range taken together and averaged out. So we're low on the rents, and that's something when we get to the end of the report we're going to comment on a little bit more. On page 13, there's some pictures of the outside of the building. See the community health clinic on the main floor, and there's a permit on page 14, 1.9 million. Some exterior alterations, including replacing the facade, upgrading the building envelope, replacing windows and door structural work. So they're investing in maintaining their assets. Almost coming up to $2 million worth there in 2017. Then 2010, just another permit showing the health clinic and the main floor. And then on page 16, you'll see that the A&O support services for older adults in regards to this property can show how the monthly rent is tied to the gross income, and that units are very small as well, 350 to 450. So you see the rents are subsidized, it's all subsidized. So that's why we don't use the actuals. And so those units are smaller than what you typically see on the market. And when you go to my page 8, we're only 68.67 of the CMHC potential rents, and that reflects that. And even if you look at the rent comps, we're on the lower end of things. So the parameters are similar. The parameters and methodology are similar to Keywayton, which is a similar property, number of units and breakdown size, and as is the market value per suite. So keeping these two in step with each other, that's my presentation.
Okay, questions, Mr. Story? Are you muted there? You don't show as muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now,
Oh.
yes.
It's disconnected. Sorry about that. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Okay. So, Mr. Broca, sorry, you mentioned the building on Keywayton, but this building is a bit older than the Keywayton building, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And locationally, they both have challenges, but would this be considered in your mind an inferior location to the 100 block of Keywayton Street?
Well, I mean, like Keywayton's right on. Keywayton is near Pacific and Alexander. This one is, in my opinion, not a good area.
Right.
So I think that both areas are below average, to put it mildly.
Yep. Agreed. And you said the suites are smaller, but they're extremely small, right? Like I think that the bachelors are about 350 feet, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Oh, and the one bedrooms are 450 square feet.
Mhm.
Okay. So those are smaller than the Kuwaitan suites, is that correct?
You know what, I don't, I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if I have the actual size. I know there are probably that gross floor area, but again, that can be inflated up or down.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's kind of hard to tell. I wouldn't be able to really give you a solid answer on that.
Okay. And this is all simply model derived, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Just want to see the one thing here. So okay. No, I think that's fine, Mr. Chair. I'll save my comments for my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Ms. Anderson?
Questions? Thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I just have one on page 16. The building features include a whole bunch of things, including some walk-in clinic, on-site pharmacy, WRHA offices, language access, bridge care clinic, health services. Are these type of features found on the previous property? Like, it seems that this one is equipped to handle the small units and the people with needs.
I believe on, oh, are you talking about you're talking about Sargent?
Well, the one that you had just mentioned, the previous one was Sargent.
Oh, Keewatin. Yeah,
Keewatin.
they have like a medical, I believe they have a medical clinic on the main floor as well. So let me do a quick search. But we're not valuing it like on that basis. We're valuing it like on a for-profit basis. And so we're not like considering that the demographic that's in there right now, because the demographic that's in there right now is there because their rent is being subsidized, and moving it to a for-profit scenario, they wouldn't be able to stay.
Okay, I can appreciate that. I was just curious as to not seeing this type of features before.
Yeah, so there's 97, it's the Bluebird Clinic, primary care clinic where clients have access to physicians, nurse practitioners, and primary care nurses for management of ongoing medical and chronic disease conditions. See a pharmacist, a dietitian, or a counselor. So it's kind of along the same lines, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I have no questions, so Mr. Story, you can begin.
Yes, thank you, sir. And just to be very clear, both this building and the Kuwaitan building, Mr. McIntyre, have what we'll broadly call community health services on the main floor. So they are similar in that way. They're both WRHA clinics and services that are on the main floor for both. So they are very similar.
Okay.
Yep. So ultimately, location is a major issue here. So we have made an adjustment to our cap rate. We have a high rise. It is 10 stories, built in 1975. So it was built by the Presbyterian Church to address urban social issues regarding housing of low-income individuals in the mid-1970s. And as we've established, it is indeed rent geared to income. And it has been rent geared to income since its opening. So we're mindful of that. We have 116 units. We've established here that these are very, very small units. So these are between 350 and 450 square feet. 350 is very, very small. And then, of course, we have a number of these what I'll call wraparound services or community health services in this building, and that is not typical of market. So, but our major issue here is that we're on the corner of Elgin and Ellen. This is well, if you drive around and have a look at the built environment in this area, it is a bit of it's a tough stretch. So locationally, we have to consider that we have a negative adjustment that ought to be in play. The assessor has used 5.45. We've used 6%. Again, we have very, very small units. We have a lack of parking, and we have this locational issue. So I've also reviewed.
Could you hold on for a
Oh,
minute here?
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Progress. The repairman's on his way.
Oh, good news.
Yeah.
Okay, so ultimately, Mr. Chair, we're just at the point where we're discussing the expenses. So this is on page 19 of my brief, and you can see that these expenses in this property run very high. The average that we have between, well, I mean, we're looking at 2020 and 2022. They're showing average expenses in 2020, 699, 466. 2022 is very high. I wouldn't consider that as a good indicator. But if a typical year in 2020 is running around 700,000, we've applied 538, 613, and that is 65%. So slightly higher than what we've applied before, but we've capped those expenses to not cause a distortion. Now, I will make my own slight adjustment here. I've used a 6% cap rate. I do think that is justified based on the location, based on the unique physical characteristics of the property, and based on the lack of parking. But if we are to use those higher expenses, then I think it's fair to apply a slightly depressed cap rate. So based on an NOI of $290 and $22, I'll adjust my cap rate to 5.75%, which would lead us in this instance to a value of $5,043,860, which we would then round to $5,044,000. So again, adjusted cap rate from 6 to 5.75 based on the application of a more reasonable expense ratio that is higher than the other capped expenses that I've presented today. So we'll make a corresponding reduction to the cap rate in this very, very specific instance. So I'll leave it there, but our amended request on the tower is $5,044,000. The main floor medical space is not in dispute. I have an R&M breakdown for you on page 20, and then the balance of the brief is just some of the statements, the operating statements, and the income and expense, as well as municipal board orders regarding social housing and subsidized housing and how they ought to be adjusted upward. I would strongly suggest that the location would merit some adjustment. So in this case, we feel comfortable at 5.75 with the application of those higher expenses. And with that, I thank you.
Questions, Mr. Brokus?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McIntyre.
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Our last property then is 555 Ellis. And I will again just open the files. Okay, so when you're ready, Mr. Brackus, on 555 Ellis.
All right, thank you. File 24-3271, roll number 13050692500, 555 Ellis, Manitoba Housing. There's two classifications. There is commercial, and then there's also the residential component. 1979. It's got a 10-year effective build. You're built on it, 118 suites, 37 outdoor parking spots. Page 3. Looking at this one here. We are, one moment. Okay, so yeah, I did opt to make a recommendation on this, bumping the apartment capitalization rate to 5.5 using the model net operating income. And so that generates a new CC20 of 7,982,000. And so again, that's based on, you look at the overall bachelor count, and there's no, comparatively speaking, there's a small number of ones, there's no twos or threes, and the parking count isn't great. So I think just the way, especially for equitability purposes, the way we've looked at like these 97 Key White and Elgin, I'd like to remain consistent. So the total valuation now is 8,786,000. I'll
Okay.
pause there and then we can keep going.
How do you feel about that value, Mr. Story?
I'd like to proceed, but it's only going to be based on a slight adjustment to the expenses. So we're certainly closer, but I'd like to continue on and just very briefly, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So continue on, Mr. Baracus.
Okay, so we've got our subject property market income assigned. So we've got rents in the $10 to $12 range for the non-residential component. We've got our comps for res on page 5 and our housing stuff all the way to page 8. We can see we're only 60% of the market area. But again, it's centennial, so it's dragged up, so it's probably not bad, especially when you're looking at it on a market value per suite basis after my recommendation. Rent's not in dispute, so I'm not going to belabor this point. Then we've got our cap rate charts on 10 and 11. Then we have the exterior on 13 and 14. And then it looks like there's some modern and completely renovated suites centrally located in Winnipeg's downtown. There's an assisted living housing option and a lot of seniors in place to age in place in their community. So I mean, it doesn't look like, especially when you look at the bathroom, it's nothing like any sort of like luxurious level of renos, but they are maintaining it quite well. But I still feel like based on the count, the bachelors and the lack of parking, a small adjustment up on the cap is equitable. And then in 2015, you can see they dropped quite a lot of money into it, 5.3. Exterior alteration to the south side, demolishing an entrance, constructing a squared off entry, some commercial reconfiguration, windows and doors, mechanical upgrades, converting a multi-family dwelling to assisted living, renovating 5 units, become mobility access units, widening all suite entrance doors, cosmetic work, updating every kitchen, servery kitchen on the main floor. So they did a bunch of work to it, and I guess that's what's, you can see the description in the photograph from Ellis Place above. So taking everything into consideration, I think we're being equitable on it, and that's my evidence. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Mr. Story?
Well, okay, so Mr. Brooks, you didn't mention the commercial portion, but I'm guessing that's all modeled, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then, okay, I appreciate that you've gone through the class code 20. Those expenses are modeled as well, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and the property has been sort of reappointed from a 55 plus to assisted living. So I guess some of those expenses are not totally germane to our discussion, but did you have a chance to look at those or just defer straight to model?
No, just defer to the model on this one.
Yep. Okay. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Anderson, questions?
There's no questions, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
I think we did have a liability in class appeal on this one.
And
Yes,
okay.
and we'll just confirm the liability in class, Mr. Chair. We'll just
Okay, then we
explore
can-
that further.
We can get rid of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. So Mr. Story, then your presentation.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so we have a housing asset in the mid 500 block of Ellis Avenue, 555 Ellis. It's 6 stories, it's masonry. That is the north side of Ellis between Furby and Langside. This is considered the Spence section of the West End neighborhood. It's unique in that the street, the McMicken Street runs through the building. There's like a drive through where the street extends. You can see that little sort of cutout passageway there. It's sort of unique. We've established that the property has 104 bachelor suites, 14 one-bedroom suites, total of 118 suites. There are only 18 outdoor parking stalls, which we should consider. Now, ultimately, Mr. Chair, we're not worlds apart from the assessor now that there's been a rec made, but our position is that 54.1% expense ratio is too low, so we've applied 55%. But I will adjust my cap rate, excuse me, to 5.5% in recognition of the fact that there was work done here to reappoint this building. And so it's we don't have a condition issue, but we do indeed have some issues in terms of obsolescences. But I think based on the permitted work and with the application of a 55% expense ratio, I think the resulting value of 7,822,690. Again, that's 7,822,690 or 7,823 is appropriate in this instance for the class code 20. So again, that's based on an adjustment to my cap rate. We believe that 55% would be the absolute minimum. We should probably see something closer to 60% in terms of expenses, but 55 is what we've applied, and I will make an adjustment to 5.5. So our new value for the class code 20 is 7,823,000. Just a small dispute on the commercial valuation. Once again, we've provided you with our cap rate study. You'll recall we looked at that property on 600 block of Portage. That was applied a cap rate of 8.25. I would suggest that this is well, there's on that corner there's strong covenants. There are national restaurants and retailers. In this case, this stretch of Ellis would typically be considered inferior. So we've applied a cap rate of no less than 8%. All of the other parameters have been accepted. So we have a slightly lower value on the class code 60 of 745,447, which we then round to 745,000. So we do respectfully submit the value of the class code 60, the main floor retail, which has been tenanted in the past by a daycare, and there's also been an independent pharmacy. But that's, I believe there's been some vacancy over the years in there, and there's certainly not strong covenants. They're not national retailers or some such thing. So based on that, and in order to be equitable, truly, with how we've treated some of these other lower quality retail spaces, we are applying a cap rate of 8% to that income stream. So I think I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, but we're suggesting 745 on the CC 60. And as I mentioned, we've made that adjustment to our cap rate on the CC 20, which has led us to our new request of 7,823,000. And with that, I thank you.
Okay, just a quick question. The vacancy rate of 6%, is that correct for the 60G?
That is what we've used here. Yes, only 6%. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
That wasn't a table. All right, Mr. Baracus, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre, questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we've now heard all the properties on today's agenda, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank everybody for their patience in dealing with my interruptions.
No problem. Thanks very
No
much.
problem. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.